What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about two teams that I think should be better than they are. They have very interesting talent. Maybe they're both on the rise. That's the Charlotte Hornets and the New Orleans Pelicans. Both of them had interesting games last night. One a blowout win, one an overtime win. We're going to break both those games down, talk about those teams, their arc, and then we're going to compare more players like we did yesterday. Sengun or Paolo Banchero, De'Aaron Fox or Jamal Murray, and Anthony Edwards or Tyrese Maxey. That one I'm very excited to hear what Legs has to say. All of that and more on today's show. Legs, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. We had some entertaining games last night to watch, including that Boston-Charlotte game, which you're going to get into, which was one of the more entertaining and wild finishes you're going to see in a while. But I know you want to start somewhere else, right? We were hoping to get a better game out of Sacramento and New Orleans, but it turned into a one-sided show pretty quickly, but at least we get an opportunity to take a look at the Pelicans.
Yeah, 100%. That's what this game really represented to me, is getting to take a look at the Pelicans. But before we do, let me just tell everybody we're presented by DraftKings Fantasy Sports. Check out what DraftKings has to offer this season with promo code ALLNBA, because life's more fun when you're in on the action. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. And yes, it was a blowout win for the Pelicans yesterday, 129-93 over the Kings. The Kings have been really hot, one of the hottest teams in the NBA. But the Pelicans have some big wins under their belt. They blew out the Dallas Mavericks. They blew out the Denver Nuggets. And now they blow out the Sacramento Kings. So they moved to 7-7. What did you see from this game? And why was the Pelicans able to dominate it right from the opening tip?
Yeah, I mean, this thing got out of control pretty early. I believe the Pelicans made their first 9 shots from the field. So when you start a game like that, and a lot of them were either Zion Williamson dribble drive layup or Brandon Ingram that's a mid-range. That pretty much was what they got early in this game. Sacramento looked tired. They didn't put up a lot of resistance defensively, but I'll give the Pelicans credit for how sharp they were at the start of the game, particularly Zion and his aggressiveness in the first half. He kind of still amazes me that he has to get to his left hand, has to get there, whether it's going to be initially going left or if he goes right, it's got to be a spin back, because you might never see Zion Williamson shoot the ball with his right hand at the rim, ever. And yet he still gets there. And I think that's the sign of a great player, an incredibly difficult matchup and cover. And that's kind of what this first quarter turned into. And the Kings were kind of dig themselves out of an enormous hole the entire night. And eventually it just really escalated. And, they were down almost 40 at one point before losing by 30 plus.
And they dominated the paint, which is something that they do. They just bludgeon you inside, with their size. You're right. The second quarter was where Zion did all of his damage, just going to the left every single time, getting to the cup, made it look easy. I mean, it looks easy against a lot of players and against a lot of teams. But last night, 12 of 16, that's the easiest it can look. I mean, that's as close to going perfect as you can as a volume scorer. And then in the third quarter, Brandon Ingram put on a masterclass. I mean, he looked like prime Kevin Durant in the third quarter, getting to his spots wherever he wanted, took a bunch of threes and knocked them down. And I always love, Legs, when a player gets a heat check and hits it and gets another one and hits it. I think he had 5 heat checks yesterday in that third quarter. It was just like, I'm going to take a bad shot because I'm feeling it. And he kept hitting them. When you have 2 players, Zion and Brandon Ingram, that both can dominate a quarter, that puts you in a bind. To me, that's kind of what happened in this. They played great defense. They shut down the Kings' fast break. But in the half court, you couldn't stop Zion one quarter. You couldn't stop Ingram another.
This was a team that, with a pretty large sample size, maybe 40% of the season played last year, was tied for first place in the Western Conference.
Right.
And then the injuries set in, right? So you look at top tier talent, and we're looking at these tandems or trios around the league. CJ McCollum, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, man, you could do a lot worse than that. You give me those three guys, I'm going to win a lot of games because you've got all bases covered. You saw it again last night. I mean, Zion's going to dominate you in the paint with his efficiency. It's just, incredible what he finishes around the basket. And the thing that amazes me is, he's got this incredible athletic, explosive ability. We've never quite seen a guy weigh that much with that kind of vertical. Started back in the AAU circuit. He became a viral sensation with these videos, and now you saw it at Duke, and now you see it in the NBA. But that's not really, to me, what actually makes him special, because although he is definitely on the high end of in terms of athleticism in the NBA, there's a lot of guys that are super athletic in the NBA. What makes him special is ability to softly put the ball up on the glass from various angles against bigger guys. He's not the longest guy in the world. His arms aren't particularly long. But when he goes in there to finish, he stays in the air longer than the shot blockers do. So they start to come down, and he's still got the ball. And then he just manipulates it around and puts all kinds of crazy English on it. It's so soft for a guy, moving that powerfully and explosively. And that's what you saw last night. He had just a series of runners getting to the rim. Now, some he got through that last line. It was basically an uncontested layup at the rim, but some of those are floaters. He spins it in a certain way when he's going at a weird angle. So he's just really a fascinating guy in his ability to beat you in the paint with this array of shot making, all going to his left. And then you got Ingram with these mid-range game at 6'11", can shoot over anybody at any time. Good enough handle to get to his spot. Good enough shooter to go up, and you think he's got a chance of making a shot against anybody from any area of the floor. And then McCollum is a combination of lead guard scorers. So, and he wasn't there last night. Obviously, he's hurt right now. But those three guys, Adam, I mean, they give you a real chance at the top of the talent spectrum in the Western Conference. Just got to get these guys out there for an extended period of time. They've had a hard time doing that the last couple of years in particular.
I mean, they've hardly played together at all. I had it down here in my notes somewhere how few games they've actually been on the court together. Let me see if I can find it. But 3 games this year, 10 last year. All three of those guys have been on the court. It's kind of crazy. But real quick, I want to go back to Zion, because you're right. It's the power. Everybody thinks he's going to dunk on me. He's going to dunk on me, right? So you're worried about that. And then he has the finesse game. So it's this weird mix of he can get to his spots for the finesse, or he could power dunk on you. And it's so hard to take away both, because you're almost playing positionally to be strong, and then you have to be, light on your feet to take him away from that. Does he remind you of anyone? Is there anyone from your playing days that comes close to that combination of power and finesse?
Normally I could come up with a good comparison for most players. I think he's a one-off. It's just, he is unique unto himself. We've never seen this particular package, right? Where with this kind of power, this kind of athleticism, and that kind of touch in a guy that's not that tall. That's what's kind of amazing. I mean, there's some comparisons with size and athletic ability to Barkley, but Charles wasn't jumping in the air and hanging and finishing shots, getting in the guy's chest and hold the ball out and shooting these crazy floaters and runners over guys. It was different the way that he did it. So I think he's just a unique, special talent. If the guy can stay out there for 70 games and give you a sustained run and be ready on April 15th to undertake the playoffs feeling good and healthy, they're going to have a chance, because he's the great eraser of mistakes. You can have a series of bad possessions, not play particularly well offensively, and the guy is going to go out there and have these nights where he's so efficient that he cleans up all of that because he finishes everything at the rim. It's just really kind of amazing to watch.
I see the chat. I always like when the chat participates here, saying Charles Barkley. Everybody's saying Charles Barkley. Blake Griffin's another guy he kind of reminds me of. Blake had some pretty good touch, but you're right that Zion's touch is in the 95th percentile of all NBA players, guards, whatever. He just has this ability to float it up there. You talked about Ingram and we talked about Zion. The CJ McCollum piece, let's put aside for a second here, because I am curious to bring this all back to where do those three players fit together. Here's what's interesting to me about the Pelicans. They have good superstars or good stars, Zion and Brandon Ingram, who have the talent to become superstars, but have not proven to be that yet. We all know that we have to see it on a bigger stage, and we have to see it be more consistent throughout the course of the year. And there's real reasons to doubt why either of them can do that. But here's why I love this Pelicans team. They might have my favorite collection of role players in the NBA. First of all, their wing depth is insane. They're playing 3 of the last 4 games. They have started Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels alongside Jonas Valanciunas. So that's a huge lineup. Big Val is a huge center. Zion's a huge power forward. Ingram, Daniels, and Herb Jones are insanely long defensively. And then Dyson Daniels and Herb Jones are 2 of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. I don't know if there's a team that features 2 guys more focused on playing defense than those 2 guys. And the one game they didn't start together is the one game they lost to Minnesota. The other 3, blowout win against Dallas, blowout win against Denver, blowout win against Sacramento. I kind of look at that lineup and I go, I love teams that have a lot of length, that have a lot of wings. 2 stars and a bunch of length. That's a great recipe for me.
I completely agree. And look, I'm going to, say CJ McCollum is, the borderline star player with what he's accomplished in his career, what he's capable of on a nightly basis. Biggest problem for them has been durability. That's if you want to like take it to another level individually or as a team that we start to take seriously, you just got to be out there more consistently. And they just haven't been able to do it. Maybe they get some stretch this year where that's the case. But in getting to their role players, you're 100% right. They have, I think, the perfect collection of guys around them. Guys that are going to play hard regardless of if they get the ball or you call their number. They don't need any of that. They run the floor. They close out. They get back in transition. They bang the offensive glass. You don't have to necessarily do anything to assimilate to them offensively. And they still bring it every night. Another guy you didn't even mention who had his first game last night, Jose Alvarado, who is like the ultimate irritant for opposing point guards. I mean, he gets under guys' skin because he's one of the few guys that's going to pick you up 75, 80 feet, turn you a bunch of times. If at any point you're careless with the basketball, he's diving on it, deflecting it, doing anything he can. He's a crowd favorite. He got a standing ovation last night when he checked into the game.
It was cool.
Yeah, as a role-playing backup point guard, because everybody can appreciate what he brings and they realize the importance of it. So you've got a number of guys who really have a lot of want to on the defensive end of the floor. Around 3 guys offensively that on any given night can get you anywhere from 70 to 90 points. Right. So you've got everything checked off. I actually even think they're well coached. I'm a fan of Willie Green. So everything's in place. It's just a matter of can you guys actually stay on the court for an extended period of time so we can see what it looks like with all 3 of you with this supporting cast that we both seem to like a lot.
It's so funny, but they're the opposite of most teams where you usually say, okay, we know what their stars are, but do they have the depth? Do they have the pieces that fit around it? You look at them, and my question is the stars. Like, I mean, Big Val's great. Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels, we just talked about. You talked about Jose Alvarado. They got Jordan Hawkins, who we both love as a young, incredible shooter with a quick trigger. They've got Najee Marshall, who's another just long wing who has a jumper, and Trey Murphy, who I really like, who's out right now. That's 10 guys. When you add the 3 stars and those guys, that's 10 guys that I trust all of them, to be winning impact players. I don't know how many teams you could go through and say there's 10 guys, but the reason they're 7-7 is, as you mentioned, it's so inconsistent what their stars do and when their stars play. Real quick though, because I want to stay on this wings point. Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, Trey Murphy. Yeah. Can you play all 4 of those guys in a rotation?
Hard.
It's hard. And then you still have all the young guards, the Jordan Hawkins, the Jose Alvarado, and CJ McCollum. So can you fit all of those guys into a healthy rotation?
Very difficult to do that. All right. That's a lot of dudes. And you also have Matt Ryan is another guy we didn't mention who can flat out. He can flat out stroke it. I mean, he's got a beautiful shot. And you're going to try to want to get him some minutes. He's playing 23 minutes a game. Very difficult. But here's the thing. I think if you have the appropriate conversations with everybody and they just kind of buy into the collective and understand that on a given night, it might not be, your night to get more minutes, but over the course of the season, it all play out so that everybody plays enough to their liking, but it can't be every night. Very difficult to play that many guys. When Ingram as a wing is going to eat up 35 minutes, very difficult to find enough time for those guys. Each of them brings something a little bit different to the table. So it's nice for a coach to have that many buttons to push, but sometimes it's difficult, to be able to push all the right ones on a given night because you do have so many options. So I just think it comes down to selflessness for those guys and understanding that you're very deep at the wing position with length, and some of those guys are shot makers, some aren't as much. So it comes down to maybe what you need that night. Do you need more of the defensive pressure, defensive presence, depending on who you're playing, and you need some guys that can guard wings? Or is it a given night where, you know what, you're going to need shot making? And sometimes that even changes throughout the course of the game and how the game is playing out. And I think that's ultimately what Willie Green's going to have to decide for those guys.
I see in the comments here, Andrew Fansworth is saying 7-7 because they've had the hardest schedule in the league. They've also had the second most home games in the NBA, so that is about to be tested here as they get ready to go out on the road. I'm kind of curious to see how they handle it. Yeah, the wing thing, so they're starting Dyson Daniels at point guard. He's not a point guard, but they're effectively, over these last handful of games, playing him at point, and it's working with those big wins. But here's the thing I wonder. You know how, Legs, there's a change to a team's roster, and it takes a couple games for the scout to get out and say, okay, what's the new look version of this team doing, and how do you adjust? Dyson Daniels handles okay. Nobody's pressuring him in these games. To me, I think that's the next adjustment of, does this lineup work? Are you going to have to put back in a Jordan Hawkins as the point guard? Are you going to have to bring in Jose Alvarado as the starting point guard? I think the scout is quickly going to get out on the Pelicans of, hey, Dyson Daniels is good, but he's not a point. Pressure him full court and disrupt their offense.
Yeah, and I think they do have the luxury, if that were to happen, they do have the luxury of having a couple guys in Ingram and Zion who are their high-volume shot takers, but they're also pretty good facilitators, right? So you can kind of run your offense earlier in the clock through those guys. If Dyson Daniels is going to get pressure a little bit, and he looks bothered by that, because you're right, it's not natural to him to come down and run the show. That's not a natural thing for him. That's not what his strength is. But they do have, as their top guys that you can give the ball at the elbow or the short post, or let them come down and run ball screen and then play out of the traps, play out of the reds, and get the ball moving. So I think ultimately, look, this isn't a high-pressure league defensively. It's not. There are certain guys and certain teams that do it better. It's not prevalent throughout the league. So I think most nights Dyson Daniels is going to be able to operate with some level of comfort so that you're not too worried about it if you're Willie Green.
Pelicans are in the 8th seed right now at 7-7. What do you see? Do you see them rising? Do you see them staying where they're at? Is it too hard to predict because of how unpredictable Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are?
Yeah, it's they have the talent level to, if all three of those guys stayed healthy, you got the talent level to be a top 4 team in the Western Conference. Because I think all of these teams, number one, have issues with health. In some cases, they're still like a work in progress with the guys that they've added. The Pelicans do have continuity, right? These guys have been together. So I think that they've got the talent level to do it, right? They've been, even if it's just, hey, passing each other, walking out of the training room, they do know, they are comfortable with each other. But I think the talent level's there. I think their best basketball is going to come. Their schedule was pretty tough out of the gate, and they've had injuries. So they're definitely a team to kind of keep your eye on as they're going to start to climb up the standings in the West.
Brandon Ingram, by the way, should be noted, was 5 of 5 from 3 last night, and he is taking a noticeable increase in three-point attempts. He's at 5.2 per 36 minutes. Last couple of years, he's been right around 4 or so. So that's kind of an interesting part of his game. He is, you mentioned earlier, a mid-range assassin, but there is a value, not to taking away the mid-range, but from understanding where are some of the mid-rangers that you can extend to the three-point line. Is there 1 or 2 a game that you can convert while still being able to get into the mid-range and be a threat from there? So an increase there, I have to imagine, is intentional based on the numbers so far.
Yeah, I think so. Look, and I think you've seen it pretty much with a lot of these young wing scorers. They don't take as many early in their career, and they start to realize, number one, it's an accepted shot. It's a shot that coaches want. Nobody bats an eye at the number of threes you take, whether they're contested or not. If you're the top guy as a scorer, you have the freedom to do that. And I think more and more guys starting to understand. You add a little step back, you add the side step, and now you can get off more shots on a given night from that distance, because it's hard to try to constantly get to the middle area of the floor. There's very few guys that just have feasted off of that. Kawhi Leonard probably top of the list, right? DeMar DeRozan, like guys like that. Yep. That is hard work to do that, making a bunch of 18-foot 2-pointers with guys draped on you. So you get a little bit more space out there. So I think it saves your legs a little bit to be able to take that shot. But, you've got to shoot it at a consistent rate or you're just hurting your team. And I think Brandon Ingram has worked on it.
Yeah. They're such an interesting team, man. And they have, like I said, great role players, a great vet in CJ McCollum. Larry Nance Jr., we didn't even mention him. I think I wonder how much he's a part of the actual roster versus how much, given how much wing depth they have. But he's a good vet and a good person to have around. So they have all these pieces. And as you mentioned, last year, right around Christmas, they were the number 1 seed. The wheels came off, not in a small way, in a huge way. They go from 1 all the way out. I'm curious to see if this team ever gets over the hump because they're so talented and they have so many of my favorite players. We've barely even mentioned Trey Murphy, who's one of my favorite wings in all of the NBA, who's out right now. But he'll be back, I think, sometime around the end of the month or there in December. All right. By the way, the Pelicans have a rematch against the Kings on Wednesday, which I love. I love these, like when a team gets beat down and they have one day off and it's like, all right, let's come back and see what happens. So that's one of the games to look forward to. Let's hit a break. On the other side, LaMelo Ball and the Charlotte Hornets, another underperforming team. We'll talk about them and some of the key pieces on that roster on the other side, as well as looking at some of the matchups. Who would you build your team around? Anthony Edwards or Tyrese Maxey? That and a host of other questions we'll ask on the other side. But first, NBA fans, the wait is over. Basketball is back, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is celebrating with an unbeatable offer. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets for throwing down $5 on the NBA. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. You'll start the season with an instant dub. And with DraftKings parlays, everyone's got a shot at a bigger payday. You can bet on multiple games or on a single game with multiple bets for a bigger payout. Basketball's more fun when you're in on the action, so download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code ALLNBA. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly for betting just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code ALLNBA. The crown is yours. You got a gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, licensed partner Golden Nugget, Lake Charles, Louisiana, 21 and older, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/basketball terms for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right, back here. Next segment here, we're going to be looking at the Celtics and the Hornets. The game that went to overtime last night. Really fun game. This was a collapse by the Boston Celtics. Charlotte had some great plays, but Boston could not hit a free throw, including Jason Tatum, who had a chance to clinch the game, but goes 2 of 3 from the foul line at the end. Legs, what did you see from this game?
Man, you're right. The collapse is a great way to put it. There's just no way the Boston Celtics should be sitting here this morning waking up with a loss. The way that they played that game, the lead that they had late. And it was a lot of things. The free throw shooting down the stretch and throughout the game hurt them dramatically. But also, you go back and there's several plays, any one of which go differently, right? The game's over. Tatum missed 2 bunnies also in the night when he was just silly, 15 for 28, 45 points. He had 2 absolute bunnies at the rim, 2 of the easy shots he had all night that he did not convert. The end of regulation and overtime. That probably changed the outcome of the game. But give Charlotte credit because they're down 9 late and inside of 2 minutes. And they just played out every possession. And if you want to go take all the games in the NBA played to this point in the season, you would have a hard time finding one player that was more entertaining or spectacular in any given game than LaMelo Ball was last night. And I encourage everybody, if you have League Pass but you didn't see the game, go watch the condensed version so you can just fly through it because they'll capture all of LaMelo's stuff. He was incredible. His handle, his deep shooting, some of the finishes he had at the rim when you just had to have it. If any of those balls don't go in, you lose the game. They had to have every one of them. Mark Williams was tremendous for them, always in the right place at the right time, and his work on the offensive glass helped them a lot. But Boston had the game in hand, and they just could not close the deal because they couldn't convert free throws, and they had some chippies in the lane that they couldn't get. And on the other end, it felt like the Hornets made every important shot they had to make over the last 2 minutes in overtime, and some of those were incredibly difficult shots.
Yeah. This was a game, legs, where I watched after the outcome was over, so I knew the final score. And this is one of those ones where you're watching and you're like, oh, hold on, how did the Celtics lose? A minute to go, they're up 8. Like, what's
Right.
going on? I want to talk about LaMelo though. You're right. The condensed version is worth it because you're going to get all the highlight plays, because there's highlight plays sprinkled in with plays that make you scratch your head a little bit. But the highlight plays, he's so creative. He plays basketball unlike anybody else in the NBA. I mean that. Like, there's some similarities about, how he sets the table or this or that. But some of his finishes, like he had a finish last night, one of the most important ones, where when you slow it down, it was actually a triple pump. He goes in the air and he fakes, comes down, and then finishes it. And you think, how on earth did this guy think to do that, let alone pull it off so effortlessly? He's so creative, legs. I think he might be the most creative player in the NBA.
I'd go with that. And the play you're talking about tied the game late. And
Yep.
you're right. And honestly, I think you could have called a foul on that. Drew Holiday came over to help on that drive. Jaylen Brown was chasing him from behind. It was really bad defense on the part of the Celtics because they're up 2, and they allow LaMelo Ball to catch he basically shoved Jaylen Brown in the chest a little bit and then back cut, caught the ball on the move at about the foul line, and he had an open path to the rim. And Drew Holiday tried to get over there. I thought there was some contact on that. That could have been a 3-point play. But you know what I thought the most spectacular finish he had? There was a play earlier in the game where he crossed up Drew Holiday. And sometimes when guys fall on a cross up, everybody, obviously everybody freaks out. If you looked at it, like their feet got tangled, you kind of stepped on Holiday's foot and made him fall at the exact time he was going behind his back to change direction. So it looked pretty spectacular. But then he goes to his left. Ball never touches his right hand, right? So he's got the ball in his left hand coming now from basically the top of the key. He goes down the edge of the lane on the left, takes the ball all the way fully extended out to his left side without his right hand ever touching it, and shoots basically a running hook shot with his left hand that kisses the glass off the top of the square and drops through. And he never had a doubt that ball was going in. The flair that he plays with, the herky-jerky motion to start-stop stuff, and then on top of it, he's a guy that's capable of going off for 5-6 made threes on any given night. He had another play last night that's, one of the best passes you're going to see, where he runs down a loose ball near half court and in one motion throws a behind-the-back pass, 30 feet in the air down under the rim. I think it was Mark Williams that caught it, laid it in. He gives you your money's worth, and he's also a guy, look, he shoots a lot for a lead guard, but that's kind of the nature of the position now. But if you want to watch them play, not only you're getting a highly effective player because he scores and makes other guys better, it's just so damn entertaining to watch him because the stuff that he tries, the difficulty on the stuff he tries at him, it's like you can't conceive of attempting some of these things, in live action. And yet here he is pulling it off pretty seamlessly.
So, legs, I'm going to take this conversation in a little bit of a tangent here because I'm so curious, and he's the perfect guy to exemplify this topic. He is such a product of his upbringing as a basketball player, which is to say, and we know a lot of their backstory, a lot of freedom, play really fast, everything goes. You want to shoot from far, shoot from far. You want to throw behind the back pass, whatever you do, but we're going to play fast. And there's an enormous amount of creative freedom. And I think when people analyze basketball, people like you and I always hear this thing about AAU is terrible. It's ruining the game. It's this or that. And I think there's some truth to the problems of AAU. But one of the strengths of that style is it allows for creativity for the people that rise through it. And I look at both Lonzo Ball and LaMelo Ball and think they see the court as well as just about anyone in the NBA. And they try things that no one else would dare try, let alone think to try. And I think that's a product, one of the beneficial products of their very unique training in basketball and the way they kind of rose through the ranks. And there's probably something to be learned from that. These guys are willing to break the mold. And as a result, they see the court unlike anyone else.
Yeah, they have a self-assuredness and a certainty and a self-confidence they play with that for any athlete, it's hard to find. It's hard to get to that level of confidence. And that's how LaMelo Ball plays. You saw Lonzo coming out. You knew he had that weird shot. He released it from the opposite side of his head. And you're wondering, is he ever going to be able to be a legitimate shooter in the NBA? And then he really worked on it early in his career, and he got it to where it looked much better. He actually was shooting a pretty high rate from the three. incredible vision, great hands defensively, length. And I would always say when I would watch Lonzo Ball play is that, man, that is exactly the kind of point guard that I wish I could have played with, because he exists on the court, Lonzo, for one reason: to make you look as good as possible as a teammate.
Right.
That's all the guy thinks about. Now,
Yeah.
you bring LaMelo along, and it's all that plus this explosive scoring ability that Lonzo doesn't really have. Lonzo doesn't think the game like that. LaMelo does. Lonzo doesn't have that ability to string together shots off the dribble from deep the way LaMelo can when he gets it going. So they're fun to watch. They do make guys better. And then in the case of LaMelo, man, he can go off at any given time. Their team, you look at the up and down the roster, this isn't a 4-9 team. They should not be 4-9. Just looking at the individual parts and how they fit together, they should be better than that. And I'm curious to see, like, when will LaMelo Ball be on a team that is like relevant in terms of the hierarchy in the NBA? I would love to see him in a playoff series that really mattered, because you could see a guy playing with the ultimate pressure of a playoff series and still doing the same things that he's doing in the regular season, because he doesn't have the filter, the ability to shut it down. He only knows one way. I see an opening, I'm going to try to make something out of that every single time. And I would love to see that flair in the highest stakes basketball.
Well, one of the guys, we could talk about a couple of guys that maybe are starting to join him to make a core, because they are one of these teams who traditionally has not done the full rebuild. They've always had these vets on the roster and kind of been 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But they have a couple pieces here. The first one I like is Mark Williams. I mean, talk about a guy who kind of knows his role and what he's supposed to do. Last night, 18 points, 16 rebounds, 3 block shots, goes 8 of 14. And that shot you're talking about, Tatum missing at the rim, Williams might have blocked it from behind. I'm not sure. But he made a lot of winning plays last night in the clutch. What do you see from him?
He's becoming one of my favorite bigs in the league, man. He's so active. He catches everything. He's got great timing on his cuts. Because think about LaMelo Ball. When you play with a guy like that, the late cut and the late find, because LaMelo will hang in the air forever when he on a drive if he doesn't have a decent shot to get off. And he'll throw these crazy bounce pocket passes and lobs, and Mark Williams is always in the right place to receive those. So his timing on those plays where he can finish is elite. He had 8 offensive rebounds last night. He's averaging 4.5 offensive rebounds a game, which is incredible. And it's second in the league. I was like, well, and I didn't realize this till last night because I was watching him and I saw his numbers last night with 8 offensive boards, and I'm like, oh man, he's got to be like leading the league in offensive rebounding. And Mitchell Robinson actually is the only guy in the league getting more offensive rebounds than Mark Williams.
Right.
He's like the perfect center for what they need, with a lot of guys that want to get shots up. You got not only LaMelo Ball, Rozier likes to get shots up. Bridges is going to shoot the ball a lot. Gordon Hayward is going to shoot the ball a lot. PJ Washington likes to get them up. So you need a center that's willing to just, screen dive, cut slash, play off of LaMelo Ball on his penetration. I think they found the perfect guy for that, man. His rebounding numbers are better in the NBA than they were when he was at Duke, which is really impressive. And he's quickly becoming, he's 21 years old, man. He's quickly becoming one of my favorite bigs to watch.
And I do think he fits with LaMelo. So what you're talking about is a guy that dives. He can play the lob threat. He can play the dunker spot threat. But that gravity on offensive rebounds is huge, because you're so worried about LaMelo Ball and his cutting and his driving and all these different things that you have to step up. And even if you play in between nicely and force LaMelo into a tough shot, you have to go from that to boxing out this monster. And it just creates so much gravity. So if I'm saying, all right, we're building the Pelicans roster, I feel like we have 2 in. We got LaMelo, we got Mark Williams. We got a foundation here. The third guy then becomes their latest draft pick, and Brandon Miller. He plays 40 minutes last night, only goes for 9.7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 1 block, but he hit a huge 3 in the corner, I believe in overtime. What have you seen from him, and is he a guy that you think, okay, that's a third piece?
It's so early for him, but I'm going to be honest. I'm not sure. Like looking at Banchero, I'm sure. I'm sure what that guy's career is going to look like. Not sure yet about Brandon Miller. he is a little bit loose with the ball, and he's got to tighten that up. The comparison that a lot of people made when he was coming out was Paul George. I mean, and this is like draft-related stuff, draft night. We're always trying to find that comparison so people at home that don't know that much about the player can kind of visualize, oh, Paul George, like that would be nice, right? You're like, but he's got to infinitely tighten up his handle and his mid-range game. Paul George is a phenomenal mid-range player. He's not great at that. He's shooting, I think, 26% from the three. But look, that I don't judge anybody based on that this early in their career, because the line, that adjustment from the college line to the pro line is pretty massive, and everything feels a little bit rushed. It's just hard. But his rebounding numbers aren't great for his position and his length. I think he's a little bit weak with the ball. Like, he can be knocked off the ball a little bit. So look, it's way too soon. You know, the jury is definitely out. But it's not like I'm watching Brandon Miller every night saying, absolutely can't miss, this guy's going to be an all-star in 3 or 4 years, or all-star caliber talent in 3 or 4 years. I am not sure about that.
What does he need to be that guy? If we think we're just building a roster here, LaMelo is your cornerstone piece, and we like Mark Williams as like this center. What does the right slasher look like here? What are the skill sets?
He's got to first of all, he's got to improve his catch and shoots, because if you're playing with LaMelo Ball and the amount of attraction that he gets in the lane with weak side defenders, you've got to be much more consistent from deep. And that's part of that strength, part of that's rhythm and timing in your release, because it's a deeper line. He's got to improve that first of all, because now you can be that bailout guy as a wing that at any point the ball's going to come to you, because LaMelo will find you, and you got to step into that. And I just think he's got to be better with his handle, because LaMelo Ball will give it up early coming up the floor. He'll throw it ahead, and that's fine. Gordon Hayward is an accomplished ball screen player. Rozier is. It's fine when those guys get it. I think Miller isn't really close to that level right now, with knowing that you're going to get something good by throwing it ahead to him, and he could just quickly call over Williams or somebody like that and immediately get into some action and get something good. He's got a lot of growth. The learning curve is going to be huge for him. He's so young. These guys all are when they come out. They're high picks. So you're not certainly passing any judgment on him yet. But I've got to see a lot more. And I think year 2, year 3, you're going to start to understand a lot better. He's got to get stronger too. He's just got to add more mass to his frame so that he can handle the ball against the guy on his shoulder or hip when he's driving downhill and not lose balance and get something good going up toward the rim, or a stop and shoot a mid-range jumper. He's a little bit weak for that right now.
Yeah, both LaMelo and Lonzo, the quicker the game, the better they are. Because, and this is true of Jokic, I always say this is true of Jokic as well, in that his brain is faster than yours, even if your body is faster than his. So the more you could speed up decision-making, the advantage goes into the people who think fast. LaMelo thinks really fast. So when you say he gives up the ball, the ability to speed up, the way that the Kings play with pace in the half court, where it's like, okay, pass, the guy catches the ball and attacks, and then passes, and then they attack, and it's just constant attacks. And now the defense has to make quick reads. LaMelo thrives in that situation. So for that to work, you need players who, if you pass them the ball and they have a half-step advantage, they create a full-step advantage and then move the ball again. So that's, I think, what you're talking about when you talk about cleaning up the handle. He needs to be able to make quick decisions in the half court, because the more the ball finds LaMelo in those situations, the better he is.
Oh, no doubt. And look, I'm sure that they're telling him the same thing every day. And they've got, for a young player that people thought coming into the league is going to ultimately be a scorer in this league, on a team with a bunch of guys that are high volume shot takers, man. Sometimes, because you look at his shot attempts per game based on his minutes, he's not getting like a ton of shots. And so that's another thing. Is he going to be able to advance to the point where he can feed himself a little bit more? Because right now that's not really the case. And he'll give it up after a dribble or two if he senses traffic. Guess what? The next guy that he gives it to is going to get a shot up. So I think he's going to start to realize that as time goes. They got some nice pieces, man. And they're so fun to watch because of LaMelo. It's like almost like Charlotte's playing. You're never going to get cheated no matter what their record is, because of the number of plays he makes where you just kind of like, wow, did you see that? Now it's a matter of like looking more like a winning basketball team. And that's the one thing that Charlotte kind of lacks right now. And in the Eastern Conference, there's room, I think, to grab that next tier for them. It's not like the West, man, where there's like 11, 12 really interesting teams. There's not that many teams like that in the East. And there's some room to grab for them if they can get a little bit more consistent.
Hope it happens, man, because they're fun to watch. They're more fun than some of the teams, ahead of them, at least in my opinion, to watch. So I would not mind them turning out to be a good team, but I'm not holding my breath, to be honest with you. 4-9 right now. We'll see what happens. They might be more of a team of the future. Let's go in now to some more of our comparisons here. So yesterday I started asking Legler who he would rather build around between two stars that are somewhat comparable. And really, it's an exercise to talk about roster building and the challenges of certain types of skill sets. Today, we have a fun one because the skill sets are pretty different, and that is Paolo Banchero or Sengun. Who would you rather build your team around, Sengun or Banchero? Now, you look at the numbers here. Sengun's actually leading, surprisingly, in points. I mean, usually that would be the one you would think Banchero is, but he's up to 20 points a game, just 19 for Banchero. Then obviously the rebounding and assisting in his favor. What do you see out of these two guys?
Well, I really like both of them. And Banchero, he was the guy coming out that I said is most NBA ready from day one, and that's proven to be the case. He's just so solidly built, very skilled. He's going to continue to add to his game as he gets more confident. Sengun is fascinating because there aren't many guys on the planet that kind of play like he does. He's very unique. We talked about him earlier about a comparison to Jokic just in terms of stylistically, and that's the guy that I think he models himself after, and there's a lot of that in there.
He does a good job of modeling it. There's a handful of players that model after Jokic. Sengun does a good impression.
He does, and so therefore, you're looking at these two guys, you say, which one ultimately has the chance to be more unique, therefore leading to something that's harder to defend or something that you can build around a little bit easier? And that would be Sengun, right? That would be him because of his passing ability, his awkward shot making with the one-legged stuff where he shoots like a set shot, one leg up in the air right in your face, where you don't even know that he's looking at the basket.
The Turkish Dirk.
That's it, man. So this is a really hard one for me because I think if you wanted to pencil in like the surefire thing, it with like steady growth, even though very incremental, I think year by year, that would be Banchero. But there are a number of guys in the league that kind of look like Banchero. There's not a lot of guys that look like Sengun, right? So I'm kind of tempted to go with the one that's more unique. I'm curious to get your thoughts and looking at the comparison between these two guys.
I think this one is one of our tougher ones that we did. Banchero is a really interesting player on a very flawed roster. I mean, Sengun last year, I think everybody would have said Banchero last year. You get a new coach, you get a couple of new role players around Sengun. And by the way, they've kind of made him the fulcrum. They've said, okay, we're going to build around your skill set. And now he looks a lot better. Banchero is on a team that I think is very difficult because of how unbalanced their roster is. They have some great front court play and they have some good defenders out at the guard spots, but they don't have a great table setter. So would Banchero have a very steep learning curve, a steep growth curve, if you gave him a more traditional backcourt and some better spacing? My hunch is yes. I like that Banchero is more of a passer. He's not just a scorer. He has some good willingness to get off ball and to do different things. But I'm going to go ahead and say that I do think that this Sengun style, this Jokic style of basketball is so valuable when you have a big who can be a decision maker, because as you noted, there's very few bigs. There's only so many bigs in the world. There's only so many 7-footers. And how many of them are smart enough and athletic enough to be able to guard the perimeter and be the fulcrum and the quarterback? This is part of what makes Jokic so special, is you put oftentimes teams' anchor, but also one of their guys that is worst at dictating how to guard the perimeter. You put them in the position to be the most vulnerable defensive player. So I think Sengun is going to have a similar thing. And I think I would give the slight edge to him.
Yeah, man, that's where I'm leaning. Looking at a film package breakdown of him and the number of places on the floor he can catch it and be comfortable. You can run it through him at the top of the key with dribble handoff game. You can run it through at the elbow and they get like some scissor cut game, and he can find you. He can play with his back in the post and pretty much always get off a quality shot for himself. If you're not going to come double, he's patient.
He's getting better at that this year for sure.
Definitely. But he can also, from that spot in the low post, his back to the basket, throw these weird angled and awkward passes to cutters like that. You don't even know how he saw the guy, and he gets it there. So I think you're right, man. I think ultimately having a big that can facilitate offense to that extent, I would lean that way. Banchero is a more polished and physical specimen. There's no doubt about that. Sengun, not the most athletic guy in the world, but athletic enough for that spot. But it's really about his ability to understand like where everybody else is on the floor and being comfortable no matter where he catches it. That helps an offense flow and continue through the clock, the shot clock, continue to progress and end up with something good at the end of it. He's like just that type of player. And they're very rare, very hard to find guys that play the center position that are equipped to do it and comfortable to do it. And he's one of them.
This next one is fun because it's so absurd. De'Aaron Fox or Jamal Murray. Now, if we look at the statistics at this one, it's pretty unanimous in the favor of De'Aaron Fox. He's averaging 32 points a game this year. Jamal Murray 16, so literally double the amount of points, more rebounds, fewer assists. Murray's got the edge in assists. But here's the thing, Legs. Murray is so hard to quantify because we've seen him now multiple times in the playoffs, and he looks like Michael Jordan. So he's the hardest player to quantify. How do you break down this matchup?
Man, oh man, this is tough because, even stylistically a little bit different. Like Jamal Murray can be an explosive scorer, but he doesn't always have to play that way because you've got Jokic, right? And Jamal Murray is not their best player. He's their second best player. So, and a lot of this conversation is, I guess it depends for me. If you want this guy to be your number two or your number one, I think De'Aaron Fox probably has a little bit more capability of being the number one, of being the guy that's the primary driving force offensively and a high volume shot hunter. He can do that. And he's got nice complementary pieces around him. Jamal Murray, I think if he were put in that role where he had to, try to average 25, 30 points a game, I don't know that you'd like him as much as you do right now in the spot that he's in. So I think they're both where they're supposed to be. This is a really hard one, man. Jamal Murray's more accomplished because he's obviously been on a team that won a championship. De'Aaron Fox is just trying to, let me just win a series and see what I could do on the biggest stage. But I have no doubt that if the Kings were able to win a first-round series and you get into a second-round matchup with one of these top-tier teams in the West, I think De'Aaron Fox is putting up monster numbers. I just don't think there's an answer for his quickness. I don't think you can game plan for his quickness. So I'd probably go with De'Aaron Fox because I think his physical tools, mainly being that, just allow you to do so many things offensively. It makes up for so much when you have a guy that can just leave people behind him and find any gap to get into. And he can score from all three levels. He can get to the rim. He can shoot mid-range. He can shoot deep. So I think I'd go with Fox. I'd lean that way because I think the upside might be a little bit higher. Even though Murray's been sensational, he's great in big games, and he's a perfect complement to Jokic, I probably would go with Fox if I'm looking for actual ceiling.
Man, Murray, just the way he plays in the playoffs and the way he played in the finals with all the pressure and against the Lakers and fourth quarters and this or that, like he's just done it so many times that it's so hard for me to pick almost anyone against him in those moments. But I will say that I think you phrased it right. De'Aaron Fox more capable of being the number one. I'm always curious, though, players accepting and fitting in, like it's better to have a great number two than a bad number one because it's so hard. Like, can a guy go from that spot to a lower spot? You never know. De'Aaron Fox, I think, a pretty unselfish player, but you are right that he is suited to be that number one on that team, and it's hard to envision him, taking a back seat. Like if De'Aaron Fox played with Jokic, do you think he would change his game in a way that's like, no, he's clearly the number two, or do you think he would still be trying to attack as much as he does?
No, he would probably still play that way, but we wouldn't be nearly as impactful because in terms of scorer, because Jokic has the ball so much and he's determining everything. Like everything's going through him. So, one of the questions out there that we got here, one of the comments is like, I guess thinking about them switching teams and what would that look like? And I think I think De'Aaron Fox has a pretty damn good chance of playing with Jokic and doing something special and still winning a championship. I don't know Murray and Sabonis combination would be viewed the same way as we view Murray Jokic. I think De'Aaron Fox, and here's the thing, De'Aaron Fox right now is playing with a big that does a lot of the same things on the perimeter with his dribble handoff stuff. Like they run so much stuff through Sabonis at the top of the key. He's so crafty and clever with the way he holds the ball out to the side with one hand, lets one cutter go by. Sometimes he'll drop it behind his back on a bounce pass when a guy's coming off. So Fox is used to playing with a guy that plays like that. And then you have the ultimate, guy you can run it through, give it, get it back in Jokic. I think Fox would probably be a better player, even though he might not put up the same numbers.
Yeah. All right, this last one I know is torture for you because I know you love both of these guys, but Anthony Edwards or Tyrese Maxey, both similar in age here. 22 for Anthony Edwards, 23 for Tyrese Maxey. You look at the statistical breakdown there, both right around 20. Actually, their numbers are pretty comparable when you go through, line by line in terms of efficiency and just the raw volume. So where are you going here? If you had to start a team today around one of the guys, where are you going?
Man, I'd have to go Anthony Edwards, and you know how much I love Maxey, and
how
relieved I was. I was saying it last year. Just give the guy the ball and get Harden off the ball, get him off the floor, and let's see what this guy is. And certainly going into the year when they allowed the Harden stuff to linger, and he got off to that great start at the beginning of the year with Harden sitting at home, best thing that could have happened to him. And everybody now can see this guy he's an all-star, and he's going to be doing this for a long time. I love his enthusiasm, his balance, his energy. He's unflappable with his confidence. But Anthony Edwards, because of, I guess, what he's able to do at his size, I think there's more things to do. Like you can envision Anthony Edwards growing into a guy as the best player on his team, being, first team all league eventually. He'll get MVP consideration maybe one day down the road, assuming he has enough team success. Like you can picture that in the way he plays. And we talked about this already about him. The thing I love about him more than anything, he's got a crazed look in his eye of competitiveness. The guy hates to lose even more than he likes to win. And I think he's obsessed with pushing the envelope on how far he can take his game. And I just think the physical prowess that he brings to it and his finishing ability and all of that, I think there's more ways that he can get you. And look, Maxey right now is playing with an MVP. He's playing with this force of nature and Embiid. So look, who knows, to what extent that influences his effectiveness. Anthony Edwards is the best player on his team. He has made this his team, despite the fact he's playing with an uber-talented player, Karl Anthony Towns, who had the team before he got there. He took it from him. It's his team, and nobody doubts it. As long as Embiid's there, no one's ever going to say this is Tyrese Maxey's team. So until he gets that opportunity, we're not going to know. But I already know about Anthony Edwards, what that looks like when you're top man on totem pole. This is what it looks like. Now he's just got to continue to get better and more efficient, challenge himself on both ends of the floor. But I think Anthony Edwards is special, and his competitiveness sets him apart.
Vinny Goodwill of Yahoo Sports had an article up yesterday about how this next generation is not waiting their turn. They're snatching it from the older generation. And I kind of agree with it. When you think of like LeBron and Kevin Durant, Chris Paul and Steph Curry, the class of the NBA, they've owned the NBA now for over a decade. But you look at how much talent there is from this young group. And I do wonder if this is a year where the young group, the Anthony Edwards, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, De'Aaron Fox. You look at the Western Conference, that's 4 of your top 5 teams with the Nuggets, who are still somewhat young, as the other team there. I just wonder if this is a changing of the guards year, where we look back and we say that was the year where the young guard surpassed the old guard, and the old guard kind of, maybe it's over for them. I don't know. And maybe it's too early to say that, but when you look at the top of both conferences, Jason Tatum, Tyrese Maxey, on the other end, Anthony Edwards, these guys are off the top.
Completely agree with you. And I think another thing that we probably didn't give Anthony Edwards enough credit for here in this conversation, he is challenging himself more defensively, game by game. He likes to take on the challenge of guarding the elite wings. And that to me ultimately is what just, emotes leader. Yeah. Follow me, man. And I'm gonna show you by example how much I'm willing to lay on the line. I'm not going to worry about foul trouble, which might take me off the court, and I can't score as many points tonight because some guys play defense like that. They'll never put themselves in that position. Anthony Edwards isn't afraid to do that. He's going to take on those challenges and continue to push himself on both ends. So he's special, man. And I think in the next, we never know because you don't know where these guys end up. How long is he going to stay in Minnesota? How long are they going to keep that team? Like, you don't know because the windows in this league are so tight. When you make a move like bringing in Gobert, like they're Conley, like you're going for it. So like how long did he keep that together before guys get dissatisfied or he starts to look around the league and goes, I want to go pair up with this star player in this city. You don't know where Anthony Edwards will be in 5 years. It's impossible to predict that because guys bounce around so much now. So we won't know, but I'm excited to see how we view him even in 2 years' time. Is he going to be an MVP candidate and a first-team all-league type of player? I think he's got the potential to do that.
They're 10-3 right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're at the top. They're the hottest team in the NBA at 9 of their last 10 games, and then the Thunder right behind them. So the young guard right now is streaking. Before we go in, so we're off for about a week here, Tim. We're not back till Monday, and I can't believe it because obviously the holidays, there are some big-time games while we're gone, and it starts tonight. So the in-season tournament, we have 2 teams that can clinch their pool and punch their ticket to the tournament tonight. The first one is the Pacers play at the Hawks, so that's a tough game. If the Pacers win, though, they are in to the in-season tournament. That's a pretty big one. And then the Lakers are the other team. Just Jazz are in LA to take on the Lakers. The Lakers should get that win. The Jazz are not too great. So the Lakers win, they will clinch. What do you think of the Pacers and Lakers as the teams with the first opportunity to be in the tournament?
Yeah, well, I think, when the league put this together, they certainly were, they're thinking about star power. So, they were hoping the Lakers would be in this position. I'm not sure anybody expected the Pacers to be in this position. They had a big win against Philly that kind of separated them and put, they now control their own destiny. So Pacers are super interesting. And remember, LeBron said Tuesdays and Fridays, man, he's looking forward to it. This is a Tuesday night. So all these in-season tournament games are tonight. And deciding matters. I'll tell you this, though, about the Pacers. Might not have been one of the teams the league expected or fans in general expected potentially be there in this, in this final 8. But they're fun, man. And Tyrese Halliburton makes them fun, and their pace is off the charts. And they would be a very difficult team to play. Now, there's a lot of people out there to think Minnesota, this is like the perfect setup for a team like Minnesota, right? Because, look at teams that have already played, deep into the postseason and won a championship. Like if you're Denver, like how much does it really mean to them when they're trying to maybe go back to back and everything else? But some of these teams that are have young talent that haven't really had any taste of success in the postseason, you could see why something like this would be important to them to give them a little bit more self-confidence, a little bit more swagger. And Indiana, I think, is one of those teams.
Yeah. If the Pacers win tonight in Atlanta, and again, that's a very tough game. That's by no means a given. But if they win, that means the 76ers will have to compete for the wild card bid. They're in that group. They lost to the Pacers. So they would be a team that they play versus Cleveland tonight in Philadelphia. They would not only need to win that game, they would need to win by as many points as they can to kind of give them a chance, which is fun. That's one of the storylines tonight.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, man, because you think about that format where you're going to pick 2 wild cards and it's going to be based on your record and then point differential.
Point differential.
But it's pro sports, man. It's like, are you going to run it up again? Yeah. You don't do that, right? It's not college football where these teams are trying to get votes. Like it's, you know what I mean? So I'm really curious to see, does that play in, man? Where you and could you imagine leaving on your star players on the court in a game when you're up 8, but you need to win by 18? With 3 minutes to go, I don't know, man. It's like, it's crazy.
Well, Legs, the one tonight to look at for that is Blazers at Suns. The Suns need to win and the Jazz. If the Suns win and the Jazz win tonight, the Suns would then trigger a tiebreaker. If not, they're going to be in the wild card hunt. So almost certainly they're going to be in the wild card hunt. And right now, the Suns have a +0 differential. So they're perfectly even. Whereas the Utah Jazz have a +19 differential. So they would need to win by more points tonight to get 19 points more than the Utah Jazz tonight. Effectively, they play the Portland Trailblazers, a not very good team. They need to win by 30 points tonight. So we might see a scenario tonight where Phoenix looks at it and goes, we're up big in the fourth, send the dogs back out there because we
Oh
gotta
my!
run this thing out.
And this would be fascinating because it goes against everything that's NBA protocol in terms of you got a 30-point lead going into the fourth quarter. Typically those guys are done for the night, right? They start putting the ice packs on the bench, and the reserves get a chance. And because you're not blowing a 30-point lead in 12 minutes, but now you're thinking, man, if they let the reserves play and you only win the game by 18. Right? Look what you've done to yourself. I'm very curious to see if that matters to teams and if they changes their approach.
How would you, if you were the coach, how would you handle? Let's say you're the Phoenix Suns. You're up by 20 points with about 7 minutes to go, and you have Kevin Durant, who usually would check in right now. Are you checking him back into the game?
No chance in that example because of his recent injury history. No way. And you're playing for something much bigger. Like when you added Bradley Beal, you got Durant Booker. You got one. If you don't win a championship, your season's a failure. And you've got, Beal's been banged up. Durant has had a lot of injuries over the last few years. No way, man. I can't run him out there for some in-season tournament trying to get a point differential when I'm thinking about the postseason and winning something much bigger.
Friday has more tournament games. The Pelicans are at the Clippers, and they could clinch a tourney berth on Friday. The Pelicans, another young team, so we might just have a bunch, like as you were mentioning, a bunch of young teams that want the confidence boost of winning something. So the Pelicans can do that against Los Angeles. I think that'll be a great game, and it has some big-time stakes. And then the Nuggets at the Rockets, same thing. They're playing for a wild card. Both of those teams are. And then the Kings at the Timberwolves, both are 3-0. Kings and Timberwolves, to me, are like the same team. They're both this really good team that are off to great starts that think they can jump up a level in the class. And both teams at 3-0, so that will be for a bid to the tournament. Only one can make it there. I think that'll be a great one. So I love it.
When is the Kings Timberwolves game?
Friday. That's Friday. So that one will be for a ticket to the tournament, and that'll be a huge game.
Oh man, and that's the two teams like I just described. Like they've been good, but they haven't really had any postseason success. So this is going to have a little bit more juice. Like I can see it being very meaningful to both of those teams to have an opportunity to be one of the teams that advances and maybe end up in the Final Four in Vegas.
So that does it for this week, you guys. Real quick announcement. Legler's going to be over on Reddit. If you are a Redditor, Legler's going to be over there doing an AMA, Ask Me Anything, basically a mailbag. So if you wanted to ask him a direct question about your favorite player, your favorite team, or anything going on in the NBA, head on over to Reddit's NBA subreddit, and he'll be over there just about 10 minutes answering your questions. Legs, hope you have a great holiday week off, and we're back next Monday.
Same, Adam. Enjoy your holiday. Talk to you soon.
Everybody hit that like button for us on the way out. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. We'll see you Monday.
We all silly like the mayor.